They said no one survived beyond the line. A border carved not by maps but by silence, where ships vanished, where stars themselves seemed to shudder. To the Empire, it was a curiosity. To humanity, it was a warning older than memory. And yet, when the Empire's fleets stretched their claws toward that darkness, we did not tremble. We remembered. We endured. We watched as arrogance steered them into the one place they should never have dared to go. For humanity has always lived on the edge of extinction. We are the children of fire and famine, of storms and shadows. Every scar on our history has carved into us, something the Empire could never understand: defiance. So when they crossed the line, they thought they would find weakness. Instead, they found something else, something the void itself had taught us. We are small, we are fragile, but we are not afraid. The question is not whether the Empire will regret its mistake. The question is, how much of it will be left when humanity is done? If you're ready for the full story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's step across the line together. The colony of Meridian was not extraordinary by galactic standards. A scattering of domes and towers nestled against a barren world. Its skies painted with perpetual twilight, its soil barely coaxed to yield. But for the humans who lived there, it was home. Children chased each other along narrow walkways, laughter echoing between steel supports. Farmers knelt in the hydroponic bays, coaxing fragile green shoots into stubborn life. Engineers labored at the humming processors that kept water flowing and air breathable. Among them was Captain Elias Vey, retired from Earth's Navy, now content to teach children in the small academy by day and watch the stars by night. His students adored his stories of Earth's oceans, its storms, its boundless courage. Elias knew those stories mattered. For the young had never seen Earth. To them, humanity's cradle was legend. What they had instead was this fragile frontier and the unspoken truth that life here hung always by a thread. Beside him, Dr. Leora. Miles kept the colony's medical ward alive with little more than ingenuity and grit. Supplies were scarce, sickness never far, yet her hands were steady, her smile unshakable. "We don't just survive," she told patients. "We endure." And those words carried weight, for endurance had become humanity's quiet creed. But beyond Meridian's domes stretched the line. Not a wall, not a fence, but a boundary of dread. Generations ago, human scouts had marked it in the charter region where signals warped, where ships disappeared. No one spoke of it lightly. The colonists called it the Forbidden Border. The Empire called it superstition. From Meridian's towers, the faint shimmer of that border was visible on clear nights, a distortion against the stars. Children whispered about monsters in the void. Adults turned their eyes away. Only Elias watched it without flinching. He had seen too much war to dismiss such warnings. One evening, as families gathered for the colony's annual light festival, lanterns glowing against the darkness, Elias noticed the silence fall. Heads tilted skyward. Leora's hand tightened around his. Above the horizon, specks of light appeared. Not meteors, not lanterns, formation, precision, warships. The Empire had arrived. They came not with greetings, but with scanners, surveying Meridian as if it were theirs already. They ignored the line humanity had drawn in blood and silence. And in that moment, as fear rippled through the colony, Elias felt a truth strike him like a blade. The Empire would not stop. The festival ended in unease. Children were hurried home, lanterns extinguished early. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some clung to hope perhaps the Empire means no harm. Others whispered what everyone feared: they were crossing the forbidden border. Elias knew what the history said. He knew why humanity had sworn never to cross. And now he wondered what would happen when someone else did. The stars above Meridian burned quiet and indifferent. But for the first time in years, the colony did not feel safe beneath them. And if you're drawn into this world already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the storm that is only beginning. They moved like a shadow over the horizon, sleek, silent, innumerable. At first, Meridian treated them as a distant storm, a flicker on the scanners, a line of blips that could be a trade convoy or a survey fleet. Then the blips split. Then they came down like teeth. Panic is a practical thing. It sharpens the senses. It makes people do the sensible things first. Lock the children inside. Seal the vents, move the generators to backup. But panic also breaks the other things: plans, routines, the little habitual kindnesses that stitched a colony together. Meridian felt those seams pull. The Empire did not waste words. Its ships unfolded above the line with a precision that made the sky look engineered. Drones fell like black leaves. Glass cannons cut the outer farms into ribbons. The first strike was surgical. A hydroponic bay reduced to steam before the alarms could finish screaming. Food gone, water is lost. One blast and months of careful tending turned to ash. Fear spread. It wound through Meridian's walkways and into the academy where Elias still told stories. He could feel it settle into the children's bones as surely as frost. Leora moved faster than fear, her hands steady as she tore open a medkit, as she took the small and the broken and made room for them. "We endure," she whispered, though the word trembled. The Empire's cruelty was not always loud. Sometimes it was deliberate and quiet raids at dawn, the rounding up of a family, because their rooftop antenna hummed with an intercepted frequency, the planting of checkpoints where mothers once traded seedlings. Sometimes it was spectacle, a public display of a captured farmer, forced to kneel as an officer. Tall, faceless, voice like a blade listed the Empire's terms: obey, supply, submit, refuse. And the next display would be larger. The message burned into everyone who watched. Anger began as a low flame. It fed on every small injustice. Jamal, the mechanic who'd kept Meridian's pumps alive for years on nothing but duct tape and stubbornness, watched his workshop gutted to make way for an Empire outpost. He cursed. He fixed a broken wrench with a hand that shook. And then he went and taught a scared teenager how to solder a makeshift. EMP trigger from salvage details, no lectures, only the look of a man who would not be catalogued as a footnote. Elias did not want war. He wanted to protect the children who drew pictures of oceans they'd never see. But when the Empire took the water stores rationed by decree, given to their installations first, he found himself gathering a ragged band of veterans, miners, and former dock workers. He taught them to move like shadows. He taught them to be quick and to vanish. He taught them one simple law: strike where it hurts. Their first strike was a darkness tricked into motion. They waited beneath the wind tunnels, breath held, until an Empire convoy passed with its engines humming the way a predator hums. The strike was small. It was meant to be a message. It was meant to slow a single supply route. They should have been ghosts. They should have been gone. They were not gone. A patrol found Jamal's trail. A drone saw the scorch on a transport's hull and lit the valley with its call. The Empire answered with a cruelty that measured pain and delivered it precisely. A supply depot collapsed. A child's face turned permanently toward the sky. Meridian paid. Meridian bled. With each loss, fear hardened into something hotter. Fury. Men and women who had taught children to read now taught them to aim. The colony's choir became a drill. The festival grounds a training field. The militia learned to bend the rules of technology the Empire took for granted. Old comms repurposed as jammers. Pressure plates cut from discarded metal. None of it was elegant. None of it was clean. It was human. It was enough to make the Empire notice. And the Empire, in turn, escalated. They sent glass barges that hovered and broadcast a low, grinding frequency that frayed the edges of sleep. They decreed curfews and took hostages from among those who had spoken to, loudly in the market. When the militia tried to ambush a remote command outpost, the outpost turned and burned the scrubland with microbe beams that left nothing but vapor and the scent of overcooked soil. The losses were brutal. The tally mounted. Still, they refused to kneel. The anger wound into defiance. Small victories came like flint. A drone disabled, a ration truck redirected, a convoy forced to circle for hours by a phantom signal. Each victory was a shout. Each shout drew a price. Each price made the next strike more dangerous and more necessary. Whisper, pause. We will not be catalogued. They learned to hide in plain sight. A funeral procession became a supply run. A wedding party masked a sabotage team. They stole a single Empire sensor and turned it into a mirror feeding back the fleet's own telemetry to confuse its arrays. For one night, the Empire's mapping painted itself into knots. For one night, Meridian breathed. But victory tasted like smoke. The Empire's response came in numbers ships that folded space with a casual cruelty, relays that muted entire sectors of the colony grid, and a slender, detached unit that moved through human lines like a surgeon finds a vein. It took leaders, it broke pumps, it left the greenhouses silent. It left the children counting the empty slots on their ration charts and learning the names of those who would not come back. Elias watched the line of lights above and felt the old stories of Earth become armor and ache in the same instant. He thought of the Academy's youngest student, who had once asked whether courage could be taught. Elias had no textbook answer. He had only the look of people on a doorstep, listening to the footfalls outside. He had only the knowledge that when the footfalls became a battering, they would do what humans had always done: meet force with stubbornness, meet certainty with the impossible. And so they planned a strike that could not be small. It would not be surgical. It would be a gamble with everything on the table. A chance to cut the Empire's head loose from its shadow. They would hit a forward command ship. They would, if possible, take its black box. They would use what they could to make the Empire think twice. They set out at dusk. The colony lined the walkways to watch the silhouettes go. Mothers held babies close. Leora braced her hands on a rail and watched Elias disappear into the dusk with a pack that looked too light and a face that looked too old. The first charge went off beneath the hull of the command shuttle. There was a scream like a world tearing. The silence. Then lights. Then something else. Something the scanners did not expect. A ripple across the dark beyond the line. No one on Meridian had sent for miracles. But the line had teeth. And in that moment, as alarms chewed through the night, as the Empire recalibrated, Elias realized they had done more than strike a ship. They had written their name into an unfolding story. Cliffhanger. The ripple answered not with peace, but with a sound the colonists had only heard once in the old myths. It was a voice from the void, and it was calling the Empire by name. If this got your heart racing, please like, share, and subscribe. The next part will not pull its punches. The ripple became a storm. At first, the Empire thought it was an interference hiccup in their scanners, the static hum of the void. But then their formations buckled. Ships staggered in their orbits. Drones fell silent mid-flight, and the great fleet above Meridian tilted as though dragged by unseen hands. From the line came the sound again. Not a voice in any tongue, but a resonance that pressed against bones, against air, against memory. The Empire recoiled, recalibrated, and tried to drown it with counter-signals. But the humans did not. They listened. Because the resonance was not threat alone, it was memory. It was the echo of every warning humanity had carved into its maps generations ago. Elias Vey stood at the barricade outside Meridian's core dome, rifle clutched in scarred hands. The militia formed ranks around Hummers with plasma cutters, farmers with jury-rigged pulse rifles, children too young to know what the word retreat truly meant. Above them, the Empire's fleet stretched vast and cold, but its order was fraying. The colonists had no illusions. The Empire would descend. It would burn their domes. It would crush them with sheer numbers. But for the first time, something greater than fear stood at their side: unity. Lyra Miles strode among the lines, her coat marked with ash and blood, her voice steady as she bound wounds and whispered the creed that had carried them this far. We endure. Each time she said it, shoulders straightened. Each time despair cracked a little further. The Empire made the first move. Dropships fell like blades. Their hulls hissed against the atmosphere, their doors splitting open to unleash armored soldiers whose boots shook the ground. Weapons spat beams that cut barricades to slag. Meridian shook. Children screamed, but humanity answered. Jamal, his hands burned raw from weeks of sabotage, stood atop a half-broken crawler with a detonator in one hand. He waited until the enemy ranks closed tight, then slammed his thumb down. The crawler erupted in a firestorm, shredding a whole platoon before the shockwave tore Jamal himself into silence. His sacrifice gave the first opening. The militia roared. They surged forward. Old rifles barked beside stolen Empire carbines. Homemade explosives tore holes in precision armor. Every meter was bought with blood, but every meter was claimed with defiance. The battle became chaotic. Empire soldiers advanced with machine efficiency, but the humans fought with something machines could never computerage: grief, love, hope. Every loss drove them harder. Every scream carried 10 more voices. Elias found himself face to face with an Empire officer, its mask blank, its blade humming with violet fire. For a heartbeat, he saw himself reflected in that mask, small, fragile, mortal. But then he remembered the stories. He remembered storms on Earth that swallowed ships whole, and sailors who went out anyway. He remembered children who needed to know that their world could fight back. He swung. His rifle cracked against the officer's mask. The blade hissed and burned his side, but he did not stop. With a guttural roar, Elias drove his weapon through circuits and bone. The officer fell. Elias staggered, bleeding but unbroken. Above them, the line pulsed again. The ripple became a wave. Empire warships strained against it, their formations unraveling. Then the impossible happened, one of the great dreadnoughts. The pride of the fleet split apart mid-space, its hull sheared open by nothing visible, as though the void itself had teeth. The resonance deepened, and every human heart shivered with the truth. The forbidden border was not empty. The Empire panicked. Orders screamed through their channels. Retreat codes tangled with attack commands. Soldiers glanced skyward, fear cracking their mechanical precision. The galaxy's greatest power had discovered a terror older than itself, and humanity stood between them and the maw. Elias, bloodied, raised his voice above the chaos. "Do you hear it? That is not our enemy. That is our warning, and today we are the line." The militia answered with fire. They surged once more, pushing the Empire soldiers back step by step, until the air filled with smoke and screams and the thunder of weapons. Meridian burned, but Meridian still stood. Sacrifice carried the day. One by one, fighters fell. The teacher who shielded her students with her body, the miner who tore a mech down with his bare arms and a charge in his teeth, the medic who stayed in the open too long to drag a child to safety. Each loss was a thread in the tapestry of defiance. Each death screamed into the void, "We will not kneel." At the height of the battle, as dawn broke pale over the horizon, the resonance surged one final time. The Empire's remaining ships twisted in panic, their engines tearing against themselves. Some fled beyond the border, some vanished into its shadow, some simply broke apart, their pieces scattering like dying stars. Silence fell. Not peace Meridian still smoldered, and the ground was littered with bodies, but silence. The kind of silence that comes when the impossible has shifted, when history itself is bent. Elias sank to his knees, his blood staining the dust. Around him, the survivors stood hollow-eyed, their weapons slack in exhausted hands. Above them, the void shimmered faintly where the line had pulsed, as if something vast had retreated back into sleep. The Empire had come with fire and steel. They had left with ashes and fear. And humanity. Humanity still stood. The final image burned itself into every survivor's soul. Children, wide-eyed and trembling, lifting lanterns into the smoke-filled sky. Each lantern has a spark. Each spark is a reminder that no matter the cost, no matter the odds, humanity would endure. The line is forbidden, but it is ours. If this story makes your pulse race, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Meridian did not celebrate. Not at first. The dawn that followed the battle rose weak and gray, its light struggling through a haze of smoke. The colony that had once hummed with children's laughter and festival songs now echoed with the silence of absence. Where towers had stood, only broken frames remained. Where greenhouses had glowed, there was only scorched glass. They counted the names. Every household, every street, each tally cut deeper than any blade. Jamal's tools lay untouched in the ruins of his workshop. Leora's hand shook as she patched wounds she could not heal, her voice hoarse from whispering we endured. And Elias, wrapped in bandages and leaning on a cane, stood among the graves, unable to tell if his stories had been enough. The cost was unbearable, and yet Meridian still breathed. Children still carried lanterns to the plaza. Farmers still coaxed life from what little soil remained. Soldiers still walked the perimeter, weapons in hand, eyes hard with memory. What was broken would not vanish overnight. But humanity had a way of stitching scars into strength. Beyond Meridian, word spread. Traders carried whispers. Refugees fled Empire space with rumors in their throats. The tale grew, reshaped with each telling. But the core never changed. The Empire had dared to cross the forbidden line, and they had paid. For the first time in centuries, humanity was no longer a curiosity at the galaxy's fringe. They were a question, a warning, a people who had stood where others would have bowed. The forbidden border was no longer merely a superstition on old maps. It was a legend, and humanity stood as its keeper. The Empire would return, of that Elias had no doubt. Arrogance was not so easily slain, but they would not return unshaken. The void had teeth, and humanity had shown it claws. That truth alone would echo in the halls of power, ripple through fleets, and carve its way into the whispers of countless worlds. And perhaps, in some distant council chamber, an admiral of the Empire would glance at a chart, see the thin red line drawn across the stars, and pause. In the plaza, Elias sat with the children. His wounds ached, his voice rasped, but when a young girl asked him if they were safe now, he forced himself to meet her eyes. "No," he said softly, "we are never safe. But we are never finished either." The girl nodded as if she understood. She raised her lantern high. Others followed. Soon the night sky glimmered with hundreds of fragile flames. rising into the smoke and stars. It was not a victory. It was not peace, but it was proof. Proof that humanity could bleed and still rise, could be broken and still stand. Proof that even against empires, even against the shadows of the void, humanity had something worth fearing. Whisper, deliberate pause. We are small, we are fragile, but we are not afraid. And somewhere in the depths beyond the line, where the void shifted and memory stirred, something vast listened and remembered. If this ending gave you goosebumps, make sure to like, share, and subscribe because humanity's story has only just begun.